You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the director of think tank Demos, Polly Mackenzie, and chief political correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, Christopher Hope. They'll be with us from now right up until midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Children set to be jabbed from early next week, reports The Times, despite the JCVI's recommendations against vaccinating 12 to 15-year-olds. That's also the lead in The Telegraph. The Guardian also leading on this story that ministers are expected to defy advice from the JCVI. The Financial Times leads on tech giant Apple's delay on introducing a code that detects child sex abuse following concerns for privacy. How could they, says the Mirror, leading on the secret plans for the Queen's funeral that have been leaked online. The Express leads with the same story, adding that the palace is in fury. And the Daily Star says the UK is set for weather hotter than Benidorm, but don't blink as you might just miss it. I'm joined tonight by Polly Mackenzie and Christopher Hope. Welcome to you both. Good evening. Let's start with the Times and have a look at that story that children set to be jabbed from early next week. And this is despite the advice from the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation against those 12 to 15 being vaccinated. So the government not heeding the advice, Polly.
Well, I just want to pick you up on the details. That's not quite what the JCVI have said. They didn't publish a report saying it was a bad idea to vaccinate 12 to 15-year-olds. They published a more nuanced...
But they've said that they can't recommend it, though, haven't they?
They said, exactly, but again, and it is nitpicky, I recognise, but it's just, on this, it's so important to be so precise, because if we're not, we fuel anti-vaccine conspiracy theories. Is they haven't recommended against it, they've said they can't recommend it. And, you know, that's dancing on the head and a pin, but it does matter, because what they said is it's finely balanced. It's slightly, the benefits outweigh the risks, but they've only looked at it through a health lens. And what they've said is that it's outside of their remit to consider any wider benefits to society or to children's education from being vaccinated. And therefore, they've passed the decision up the chain to the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, who will now make a further recommendation to government. So I just think we need to be really, really careful here. You're totally right. They have said they can't recommend it, but that's slightly different from saying they recommend not doing it. They are giving ministers a real window to say, look, there are other considerations, and ministers are, I think, going to go ahead, as is being reported here in the Times and the Telegraph, with the support of the Chief Medical Officer to say that there are wider benefits. If we can keep kids in school, that's a huge benefit, not just in the immediate term, but to their whole life. You know, we've had 2 years of schooling massively disrupted. Our kids, what they need most of all is to be in school, to have an uninterrupted year. And I think those considerations are what the Chief Medical Officer and the government will be considering.
Yes, the committee concluded that it couldn't recommend mass vaccination of millions of healthy children since COVID is only a mild illness for the vast majority of young people. But many of the papers reporting that the government, I mean, some leaks actually saying that ministers have suggested that actually vaccinations for that age group will go ahead in a few days' time. Christopher.
Yeah, I think that's over-egged, actually, because I actually wrote this story in tomorrow's Telegraph, so I've been doing it all day. I mean, what's happening here is the JCVI had a very narrow remit. They could just look at the effect on the 12 to 15-year-old cohort of people. They couldn't look any wider than that. They couldn't look at the effect on teachers who had to teach these children, or the effect on wider effect on education and the effect on mental health and withdrawing children from school. Those are the areas which the 4 chief medical officers, led by Chris Whitty, are going to look at. And the ministers are hoping that by middle of next week, when you looked at the whole issue in the round, not just at the narrow point that Polly said about the 12 to 15-year-olds, they will then decide that actually, on balance, it's better for general public health that we should get on with this vaccination. I think the Times is a bit toppy on the timing, because we reveal in tomorrow's Telegraph that actually every single parent will have to give written confirmation they approve and give permission for each vaccination. That can't even start until the CMOs have reported back, probably on Wednesday or Thursday. So it won't be till the following week, I would imagine at the earliest, when written consent can start to be granted. There's a lot of paperwork, a lot of red tape, and important red tape and important paperwork before we get this started. But certainly we all think that's coming.
And Polly, what sort of impact do you think parental approval will have on the rollout of this? Should it go ahead?
I think the key part is bureaucratic. As Chris says, it takes time for schools to put letters in kids' school bags or even send emails. It's routine when it comes to flu jabs, for example, which are given out in school environments. And certainly the school my kids are at send out 5 or 6 reminders over the course of the run up to the flu vaccine, because so many people don't immediately get back to them. There will, of course, be some parents who don't feel comfortable getting their kids vaccinated. And I think even though, if you poll the public in general, people are quite comfortable with the idea of mandating vaccination, I don't think we should go that far. I don't think it actually helps anybody to be forcing vaccines, especially onto kids. It's an emotive thing, or trying to overrule parents. So there will be a small impact on some parents who say no, some kids, some teenagers who may not wish to be vaccinated, of course, as well. But the main thing is simply the paperwork. And that, of course, may mean that vaccine programs have to last quite a long time in school if you are consistently having to wait and to chase up those forms.
I should say.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I should. Polly's totally right, and we haven't even got there on boosters yet. We're still waiting for the JCVI to rule on whether we need boosters for people to top up their double jabs from early this year. So this is the beginning, and there is frustration that the JCVI can't get on quicker with this and assess the information faster. We appear to be lagging behind other comparable countries, and that's not acceptable for a lot of people in government.
Let's move on to the Times, different subject, in social care. The headline there, PM to break pension pledge for overhaul of social care. Are people happy and willing to pay for it, Polly?
Well, social care is one of the biggest issues, certainly, of my lifetime that has been unresolved. We have had 5 different commissions or investigations into what we should do about social care. There was nearly a settlement in 2010, which George Osborne torpedoed by saying that it was a death tax that was going to be implemented. The coalition government, in which I served, tried to implement something and then sort of wimped out and gave up on it because it was too expensive. Theresa May managed to completely torch the 2017 general election campaign with her plan to do something on social care. And Boris Johnson promised that one of the big things that he would do after winning in 2019 was sort out social care. He said he had a plan ready and waiting to go. And now we know that they're still, in fact, hacking out the details of it. It's been controversial because they've gone back to this idea of a national insurance rise. Polls pretty well when you ask people, a bit like Gordon Brown did back in 20 years ago to fund the NHS. But the problem with national insurance is, first of all, Conservative manifesto says they won't put up national insurance, but also it's only paid by working age people. And at least half of the social care budget goes on elderly people, and the asset protection scheme they're talking about mainly will benefit older people as well. So it feels a bit unfair for working age people to pay for the asset protection of wealthy older people. However, so they've got one more pledge that they're going to reverse, which potentially is getting rid of the pensions triple lock so that pensioners are at least contributing a little bit.
Yeah. Christopher Edging to get in there.
Well, she says, Polly rightly says people are generally quite happy with it, but I wouldn't suggest that Tory voters are, certainly because of the breach in the manifesto that was passed in 2019. What I don't understand is if Boris Johnson had this idea ready, an oven-ready idea on the steps of number 10 in July 2019, why then went into an election 5 months later saying he won't increase national insurance? If that was the plan, which he's had a plan, let's say he had a plan set out there in July, why fight an election on a policy he knew he'd have to break? Unless he had no plan, and the plan has been cobbled together since the election, and what he said on the steps of number 10 isn't quite the plan he said he had then. This plan will really annoy Tory voters, core voters. As you know, pensioners don't pay national insurance. It's a plan written on the backs of the young, and it'll be a problem, I think, and it could be a real disconnect with some of the party's core voters here.
Yeah, and it's going to be quite difficult, isn't it, for him, Polly, because he's going to be breaking 2 manifesto commitments, not 1, but 2. And the suggestion that we might surmise from what Christopher was saying is that there was no plan to start with.
I think Chris has hit the nail on the head. That, of course, there wasn't a plan. It's Boris Johnson. But nevertheless, that doesn't mean this isn't a sort of halfway decent plan. It's, you know, if I was the Prime Minister, it's not the plan I would implement, but that's kind of neither here nor there. As I said, we've been going up and down this mountain for my entire life in our politics. And it's got to stop. I don't like this plan particularly. I don't particularly want young people to pay. But if we're worried about inheritance or we're worried about asset inequality, we can always do things to address those elsewhere in the system. And, you know, Chris is completely right. The Conservative voters, Conservative backbenchers torpedoed an effort by Phil Hammond under Theresa May's leadership to make a much smaller change to national insurance around self-employed people, precisely because of another promise not to put up national insurance. It's possible this will be torpedoed. The Labour Party is kind of already gearing up to say that they're against it, just as they were against Theresa May's different but equally sensible plan to put some money into social care. I really think we've all got to just hold our noses. Of course, it's an imperfect plan, but it'll do, and we can't spend another 40 years waiting for perfection to come along.
Hold our noses and get on with it. Polly, thank you very much. And Christopher, for the moment, stay with us. We're going to take a break. Coming up, this story on the front of the Financial Times. Employers tempting workers back into the office with yoga and DJs. Would that get you back at work? Stay with us to find out. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Director of think tank Demos, Polly Mackenzie, and Chief Political Correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, Christopher Hope. Welcome back to you both. Let's have a look at the FT. And this is very interesting. The lengths that employers are going to get employees back in the office. A DJ, yoga, £1,000 bonus. Polly, what do you think?
Well, I haven't been trying any of these things to lure my 20 or so Demos colleagues back to the office, but maybe that's what I'm doing wrong. We have improved the quality of the biscuits and the coffee, but I think, you know, we're trying to find the new normal, aren't we? We shifted the default from everyone has to come to the office every day to everyone's at home every day for office workers, which of course we must remember is only perhaps 45% of the population, even at the peak, weren't travelling to work. So it's we have to remember lots of people, this is an irrelevant conversation. But we've been doing some work at Demos on the kind of the policy implications of that big shift to flexibility. And what we're trying to establish now is the ground rules of a hybrid model where you do get the benefits of people being in the office sometimes, but people also get to stay at home. And I think if a bit of the power has shifted to employees and employers do have to make it worthwhile, I think that's probably a good thing. I predict, though, as a policy prediction, DJs are not going to last very long.
Christopher, you look as if you're scoffing at that idea of the power transferring to the employees.
Really? I mean, you know, which world does Demos work in? I mean, I think that people should be glad they got a job. It says this FT article says that Phoenix Group is providing safety social events there. You can wear lanyards, different coloured bands saying, I'm keeping my distance, I'm okay with high fives. Honestly, really, I think, you know, bonuses might be required to solve the HGV driver shortage. Get them to get more stuff into our shops. But really, I think in office work, I think we should be glad to mix and blend our working lives maybe. But, you know, get back to work. And you don't need yoga, do you? DJs, cash on offer to do a job to pay for already? What's Skylight doing?
People in my ear are saying, yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Of course, the gallery does. The gallery does, yeah.
Chris, Chris, look, this is free market economics. You're supposed to be in favour of this. Employers and employees negotiate what works for them. And if, whatever works for the employers, they should try out in order to get the best out of their employees. I mean, it's just, and if actually having a bit of fun or collaboration or making it worthwhile to travel to work gets the best out of employees, then employers should be absolutely free to do it and not be told by Chris Hope to be stricter and more austere and less fun.
I'm not saying that.
Chris, do you want a quick comeback?
Well, I'm not saying be stricter, am I? I'm just saying that do we need all these extra add-ons? Let's get back to work and get the economy going. I mean, but perhaps Demos thinks that yoga will make you work better. I don't know.
We shall see. Let's all get back to work. I mean, we've all been working throughout, actually, here. Some in the studio, yes. Some at home, and it's worked pretty well. But I think hybrid is the future. Polly and Christopher, thank you so much for taking us through the papers this evening. We'll see you a little later.